Hi Francis, I'm so excited to be here with you today. Oh no, go ahead, please take a sip.
Thank you so much.
I guess first of all, congratulations on your Tony Award nomination.
Thank
Um,
you so much. I'm flabbergasted and thrilled and just really, really excited by all the acknowledgement of Asian artists this season. It's very unusual. In fact, there's history being made because, up until this year, the only actor ever to have been nominated for a Tony as an actor for a play on Broadway was B.D. Wong in 1988. And that's in 78 years of Tony history. So finally, we have Daniel Day Kim nominated for lead actor in a play. That's the very first time. For the very first time, you have two Asian American actors nominated for plays in the same year with Conrad Ricamora and myself. I just feel like it's a real moment to celebrate, and I'm especially grateful to have been acknowledged for playing David Henry Hwang's father, who was an immigrant to this country, and in this time that we're living in, where immigrants and many disenfranchised people are being targeted, it feels like something like some of the best that theater can do to represent on stages right now.
hmm. Yeah, wait, there's so much in there that I want to unpack over the course of the conversation. But maybe let's start from the beginning. So how did you get involved? What got you excited about the project?
With Yellowface,
Hmm.
um, well, actually, it was first written. David first started writing it in around 2005. And out of the blue, he called me and asked me if I would come to the Lark Play Development Center here in New York, where playwrights had stuff that in development read for other playwrights, and then get feedback. They would have a conversation. And the way it worked, you just got pages out of the blue, and you never knew who you were playing, what the play was. You learned as you were reading, literally. And so the very first pages I got, I learned, oh, I'm David's father. Oh, I have an accent. Oh, I used to work in a laundry. Oh, I'm an immigrant. Oh, I now own a bank. Oh, I have this radical faith in the American dream. You know, all of this I'm learning in the 5, 6 pages of this scene as we're reading it. And over the course of maybe a year and a half, 2 years, every few months, David would call and I'd read some more. So I heard that they were doing in 2007, 2008, um, a, a, a co-production between the Mark Taper Forum in LA and the Public Theater in New York. And I had worked at the Public before. So I told my agents, you know, that we should expect a phone call soon with an offer or maybe a chance to audition for this brand new play by David Henry Hwang. And we never got a call.
Huh.
So I asked my agents to call the casting people, and the casting people said, we don't want to see Francis. David says that he's too young to play his father, and he has this, other actor who lives in LA that did many of David's early plays in the 70s, who is more age appropriate. He has that actor in mind. And so I was like, oh, well, okay, well, I was helpful and I learned a lot. That's great. But then out of the blue, again, I was called and asked to come and audition for one last workshop of the play because that actor couldn't or wouldn't be able to do that workshop. And so I walked in and I met director Lee Silverman for the first time. And I, my memory is that one of the first things she said to me was, "You will never play this part, but we would be really grateful if you would help us work on developing the show over the course of the week at Stanford." So I thought, am I just a doormat or should I be helpful? And my whole life, I've just wanted to be of service to theater, to telling stories, to playwrights especially. And David's a hero of mine. So of course I said yes. And I did that workshop and I learned so much. And it was so freeing because I knew I would never play it. So I could try anything. Nothing was wrong. It was just experimentation. And I was never freer. So they did the show in LA. And for whatever reason, that actor couldn't or wouldn't be able to do the show in New York. So I was asked to do it in New York. And back in 2007, 2008, and the show won an Obie. I won an Obie. The show won a Lortel. I won a Lortel. And it really was just a real springboard to having this relationship with both Lee Silverman, the director, and David in developing new work in just the last 17, 18 years. So, cut to 17 years later, and it's the pandemic, and no one knows whether theater's ever coming back. And Lee believes that in this play so much that she asked Audible to record the play. So they recorded it, and I didn't play David's father. I played lots of different other roles, and a wonderful, you know, Chinese actor from England played the father. And they discovered that, this play really is current. It's both funnier and more tragic because of current events. In a lot of ways, the world has caught up to what David was writing about. And so Lee and Daniel Day Kim pitched it to Roundabout Theater here in New York. And a few months after it was announced, I got a call from Lee saying, "We never talked about anybody else. We never made an offer to anybody else. We want you to do the show." And I said, "And play whom?" Because I really want to play the dad. And she
Yeah.
said, "Yes, to play the dad." And I don't know who else. So originally, I played like 16, 17 different characters. And this time I played three because they wanted to isolate the father a lot more. And so that the audience could follow that story alongside David's story in the play. And I gotta say, from beginning to end, my experience with Yellowface has been a dream. I've learned so much about myself, about my craft, about being helpful, and working on it has always felt like um, speaking truth to power
Yeah.
and spending time with family at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, what have you learned? If you can just give us one example.
Well, on so many different levels, in terms of craft, I think I learned because, with very little costume changes, you could suddenly come on stage and say, "I'm Bernie Jacobs," and then you cross the stage and you say, "I'm BD Wong," and how do you do that? Except by finding the essence of that person and why they're in the play. And I learned very quickly to um, try to find what I had in common with those characters. Um, and I think that in a way, that's a great metaphor for what the play is about. Who gets to choose who we are and who gets to decide, what our identities are. So often we as Asian Americans understand how we're being perceived and the labels that are put on us and how our identities are often mistaken. Our personalities are often misinterpreted, um, not because of anything that we do, but because of how other people are seeing us. And why can't we decide? David's father in the play says, "Why can't I be Jimmy Stewart? Why can't I?"
Mhm.
You know, um, uh, and in a perfect world, we all could decide, who we wanted to be and feel empowered to do so. We're not there yet, but I also learned, I think, more about my own parents by playing David's dad, and the incredibly frustrating and infuriating and loving kind of relationship that different generations uh, can have, how they misinterpret each other, how they misidentify each other, how they're trying to impose an identity. I mean, parents want so much for their kids, but sometimes it doesn't comport with what a kid wants in their own life, and vice versa. We have an idea of who our parents are growing up, but do we really know who they are? How they love, what their insecurities were when they were growing up, all those kinds of things I got to explore with this play. um, and so that's why it kind of felt like I was spending time with my family and learning about my relationship with my own family, and by extension my relationship to my community, to my country, to the world, at the same time.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's your role as the father of that really brings the whole play together, because otherwise the play is just a comedy, right? But then because of the emotional weight that your role brings in, and because of the way that you have acted this out as well, suddenly we're not just looking at a caricature, because that is what Yellowface is all about, but we're looking at a person,
Hmm.
right? So how did you balance that fine line? Because I know this is hard, especially to be the bespectacled Asian parent that is oftentimes
Hmm.
featured in a lot of Asian American cinema and a lot of American cinema about Asians. So how did you figure that out? Yeah.
I think David does a brilliant job of incorporating the humor that comes from recognition of what is true, perhaps, about some stereotypes. And then he flips it on its head, and in really unexpected, sometimes funny, but sometimes also very tragic ways, very dramatic ways, um, showing that, our perceptions, our preconceptions of somebody with certain characteristics, an accent perhaps, or glasses perhaps, a certain age perhaps, a certain ethnicity, a certain race perhaps, that all of those preconceptions can be wrong, are oftentimes very reductive. And so I'm really grateful that David both allowed his father to be fully himself, as ridiculous and funny and outrageous and self aggrandizing as he was, and optimistic as he was, and at the same time allowing for room for him in the play to discover that his father's optimism, his father's radical faith in American ideals, the things that America says it believes in, that faith was also really serious, and the kind of faith system that grounds, and not just a country but a way of looking at oneself. Um, I think that David has said that, when he was first writing the play, it was meant to be a farce, that he thought he was writing a response to the failure of his play Face Value, which was a play he wrote in response to the casting controversy of Miss Saigon. And he originally thought that he was writing this wonderful sort of revenge play. And one night, while we were in previews at the Public, the artistic director there, Oscar, um, Eustace, said to, um, David, isn't it amazing that you thought you were writing this, theatrical revenge play, this farce, and what you've really done is written a tribute to your father? And David's first reaction was, no, I haven't. All of his life. David told me, whenever his father entered the room, his father was the star. He could win a Tony. He could be, on the short list for the Pulitzer a number of times. He could write operas that are done all over the world. He could be a spokesperson for Asians in America. And it didn't matter whenever he was around his dad. His dad was the star. And And here his dad, in his own way, was insisting that he was the star of this play too.
Yeah, and Francis, you are that star in the play. You're the one who brings it all.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I, you know, I kept asking the director, am I doing my job? Because I feel like I'm having so much fun. I'm not obsessing. I'm not worrying. I'm not, coming up with lists of notes for myself the way that I usually do. I'm just having a blast. The one time I did express concern to our director was, I said, when we first did the show, I was concerned about a couple of things about believably being old enough to play the part. Um, and also, landing the comedy that I really wanted people to understand that this wasn't just this polemical, didactic show about race in America, that it was a family show, really. Not that it was, for children, but that it was a show about family, about making Asians human. And I think that comedy is often essential in doing that. Um, this time around, I was not worried about the comedy. I was worried about people taking Henry seriously, about people understanding that, um, understanding how seriously he believed in what he was saying, in all of his hopes for David, all of his hopes for his family, all of his hopes for the country. When he says, finally, I can become ambassador to Great Britain, he means it. And as funny as it is, it's like, why shouldn't he have had those expectations? Look at who's running the government now. And you wonder, why couldn't Henry Y. Hwang have ever been nominated to be an ambassador to Great Britain? He would have been great.
Yeah. No, I think there's no one who really loves this country more than people who choose to be here, which is like
Yes.
immigrants, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and so
ironically, we're living in a time when many Americans are targeting immigrants for being un-American, when oftentimes immigrants are the most American among us.
yeah, no, it's funny. Every time I see a red pickup truck around here and it's always an immigrant driving it, I'm like, yeah, I get it. They're always blasting country music too.
Yeah, I mean, you can believe whatever you want. Just don't force me to believe the same thing. I mean, isn't that the essence? I mean, what Henry believed in was freedom and justice and inclusion. It shouldn't matter, if Henry in the play says, "Why can't a white guy play an Asian if he's the best guy for the part?" And I remember when David first put that into the play, it was very controversial. There were many people, even in the company, who were like, "I didn't know that was what this play is about." And it's a testament, I think, to David's sort of radical compassion, um, that he can include that. He also includes that we're not there yet, where it is okay, but in an ideal world, wouldn't it be great if anybody could play anything as long as that person had the requisite human qualities?
Hmm.
Um, uh, all this anti-DEI stuff going on now assumes that if anyone like us gets a job, it's in spite of our qualifications, not because of them. And they assume that if we got rid of DEI, it would not necessarily mean that people who are privileged uh, would not be qualified. I can say this better. Um, It assumes it assumes that white people, straight people, are by and large qualified, and that we are disqualified necessarily simply because we are Asian, because we're gay or non-binary or whatever it is, and which is at its root the anti-DEI argument. And um, I think I wanted people to understand that when Henry said that it should be okay for a white person to play an Asian on stage, that what he meant was we're all the same, or we should all be evaluated in the same way. Um, we should all be given that chance
Hmm.
to be evaluated the same way.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting for you in particular because you were born and raised in San Francisco, yet you play an immigrant father. And you mentioned
I've
earlier,
played so many different kinds of immigrants, yeah,
yeah,
and people who, live in Japan, or people who live in Korea, or in Thailand. Yeah, I
yeah,
think that this play feels so current, not just because of the current political circumstances that we find ourselves in. It also feels current because we still have a long way to go in terms of representations of Asians in media, where we are human beings first and not representatives of a far off culture first. I think that when many audiences come to see a show that focuses on an Asian character or an Asian story, that they don't look at it and identify with the characters first. They see it like a cultural experience, an exotic experience, like going to a museum or to the zoo, where they get to, you know, um, take a vacation among people that they have nothing to do with. And when I go to see a play like Death of a Salesman or The Crucible, I don't assume that all white people are like the people in that play. What I do when I go to see a play or watch a movie or watch a series is I try to find myself in those experiences, in those characters. And I wonder what I would do if I were in those circumstances. That's what people do when they watch themselves um, in media. And we're not, Asians haven't had that moment like A Raisin in the Sun for African Americans, where there's a cultural moment where we all understand these are just people trying to buy a house, you know, trying to maintain their family with dignity and get by. We haven't had a moment like that yet
hmm,
in for Asian Americans. And in fact, Yellowface is the very first play on Broadway that focuses on an Asian American story where it's not Asians in a far off country. And I'm really proud of that.
yeah. I think the interesting thing about Yellowface and about your role in particular, and thinking about this larger conversation on DEI, is how it's playing with this idea, but also is in reverse to pigeonholing, which is a
Mm.
big problem, right, in theater and getting casted and things. Just like as you were saying before, am I old enough to be in this role or not? Honestly, Asian don't raisin, so like, right, but
Believe me, I coming back to the play, I did feel 17, 18 years older than I
yeah,
did the first time.
your persona, yeah, I did not doubt at all that you were father.
That's so great. But I've had people after the show um, greet me outside the theater and say, "Boy, it didn't take you long to take off all that old age makeup." And I was like, "I wasn't wearing any makeup. I'm really sorry to tell you."
Right. Yeah, and I think that comes out so well, right? The age, and you mentioned earlier your parents that you were thinking about. Were you referring to them, or were you drawing inspiration from them when you were trying to embody your role?
drawing a lot of inspiration from my parents, from my aunts and uncles, from my grandparents, from my own brothers and sisters and cousins, at times. I have nieces and nephews that I thought about a lot when playing the student, the outraged student, at the meet and greet with David Henry Hwang and the star of the play, Marcus G. And I thought about a lot of my, you know, folks um, as inspiration for certain moments, but also it was so many of them are gone now. And it was like having conversations with them again in scenes where I was playing Henry or the scene where I play Wen Ho Lee, um, drawing not just from the things that we all laugh about, but also from their dignity
Mm.
and their strength. I mean, the strength it took to come to this country 4 generations ago, initially in my family, where you didn't know the language, where you didn't have any money, you just hoped, and you worked hard. Um, the inspiration of, my parents being among the first of their generation to move out of Chinatown and to convert to Catholicism and to um, raise 9 kids and put them all through college and to pay off a house that eventually they knew they could leave to all 9 of their kids. And the accomplishment of that essential, quintessential American dream of leaving your kids better than the way you started, um, just moved me so incredibly that it was not difficult to find um, emotionally things that I had in common with Henry, with Wen Ho, even the student.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, so in a way, you say David Henry Hwang was doing this in tribute to his father, but in a way, it's a tribute for you. It's a tribute to everyone who raised you as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, I think that a lot of my work, not just with Yellowface, a lot of the things that I choose to do um, is, essentially, I, I choose things because I want, because that piece is saying something that I want to say on behalf of my family. Um, and my character may not necessarily be the one to say it, but I want to be able to be of service to the piece in creating an experience, creating a dialogue that I want to have on behalf of my family. And I know that other people don't have the luxury, or the good fortune that I've had to, be able to choose those kinds of projects all the time. I genuinely feel incredibly lucky. I've been very poor sometimes, and eaten, packaged ramen, you know, for a week, to make ends meet. But it didn't matter because um, I can't, I can't do the work unless I can find something in it that I really believe in.
Yeah, and then as you were saying earlier, I mean, Yellowface feels all the more important in these times, especially with all the anti-Asian, anti-China sentiment that's happening right
Hmm.
now. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, so
There's
do
an
you,
erasure of history going on right now.
Mhm.
You know, when we first did the show in 2007, 2008, people were anticipating Obama in the White House. And we thought, why are we still talking about identity? And isn't Donergate over? Didn't Wen Ho Lee get released? So, the fact that he spent 9 months in solitary confinement, okay, but that's done now. That's what I was hearing back then. This time around, what I heard a lot of people saying is, oh, this is happening again. The internment camps can happen again. here's an example of the very first example of rights actually being taken away from people when Roe v. Wade got overturned. Um, we can allow rights for corporations, but we suddenly it's like we can take rights away from people. Um, and so I do think that the play, although David was writing it 20 years ago, anticipated how fragile our relationship to um, how we define ourselves is. You know, we're only America because we fight for uh, what makes us American. And as soon as we don't fight for it anymore, it can be taken away and we can keep saying the right things, but they won't be true. They've always been untrue to a certain extent, but we've always, over the course of time, gotten closer. And now is one of those points where we're taking big steps away from those things. And so the play, I think, feels really visceral to me. It feels very current and funny and ridiculous because the news right now is ridiculous and it's great. I'm so grateful to David for allowing us to laugh at it, as well as cry over it. Um, and if nothing else, I think David, although Henry winds up being disillusioned, um, David allows for a revival of his own faith in his dad's dream and trying to make it better. And I think that's what the play does for me. Every time that I did it, I felt stronger and more determined to stand up and speak out.
Yeah.
And I felt like audiences were getting that too. We're feeling that as well.
Yeah. I mean, Francis, do you believe the American dream is still real?
I think it's always been a fiction to begin with. Um, I think that it's a fiction that we've all wanted to believe in and that we were working towards. And I think that it's harder to work towards now than it was a year ago. Um, but as an idea, I think it still does exist because I see examples of people. Look at all the people on the streets. And it's not just us on the streets. It's not just Black Lives Matter on the streets. It is ordinary, everyday people who voted against their own best interests are now out on the streets and attending meetings and speaking out in ways that, these aren't radical people who are used to speaking in public. These are examples of just everyday people fighting for their lives now. And they realize that that's what they're fighting for. So yeah, I do believe in the American dream. It's always been an idea, and I think it still exists. I think we still, to our credit, cling to the idea that, yeah, we are all created equal.
Yeah, no, I remember when I first watched the play in fall, I
Mm,
went with a couple of other friends who are um different generations of Asian American. One was a
mm,
transnational Asian. And then
mm,
afterwards I met up with another couple of my friends, also like second or third generation immigrants. And I think that optimism felt very palpable. And
mm.
the fact that we're seeing this again at CAAMFest, but now in PBS in the next week. The context is just so totally different, um, historically, I
And
think, but also in scale.
PBS is getting a special, Great Performances is getting a special Tony Award,
Mm.
um, to acknowledge the important role that Great Performances has in the art but also in creating national dialogue and creating national community. Um, it's what, you know, when the election happened, we were all wondering, like, what do we do? What do we do? And backstage before the show, the very next show after the election was called, you know, Daniel Day Kim and I stood in a circle. We always circled up before the show, the company, and we each, in our own way, said, "This is what we do. We tell this story, and we do it proudly and without asking for permission and not apologizing for it. We tell the truth." And that's what the arts can do. It can entertain, and by entertaining, bring people together to have a discussion. You know, I did another show of David's called Soft Power, and there were board members who came to see that show who were very upset because their political identities were being challenged in this play, like sort of a reverse King and I, where instead of a civilizing Westerner going to an Asian country to civilize the natives, it was about a civilizing Asian person coming to America to civilize the savages. And in so doing, you know, just challenging a lot of people's assumptions about civilization and savagery and democracy and other forms of government. And so, you know, board members, people who give a lot of money to the theater were like, you know, why am I giving money if you're going to do shows like this? And the artistic director, Michael Ritchie, said, that's what art is for. That's what you give money to do. You know, you can answer any way you want. We're not telling you you're wrong. We're just asking you questions to challenge you to re-examine why you've made certain choices in your life, you know? And we're not telling you that you're wrong. We're just asking you to look at it again. And at its best, I think that that's what art does. It shakes us up and helps us to come to our own conclusions. You
Yeah.
know, art is so democratic. It allows you to decide. You know, I'm a firm believer in, you know, the audience is always right. Any individual audience member, if they think, oh, this show is confusing, well, they're right because they were confused. Another person seeing the very same show could be like, oh, that was so beautiful. It was my life. I really identified with it. And they're right too. They could, though, both of those responses are actually exactly right. And that because this is life, this is art.
Yeah, and I think it's also interesting to think about these mirror perceptions that you've been describing, both within the board members and the audience.
Mm,
But now that we have this play into a film that will be screened
mm.
online and perhaps on TV, have you seen yourself act?
We had a little sneak peek pre-screen a couple of weeks ago. And of course, every single person in the show came away saying, you were fantastic. The entire company was fantastic, except for me. I'm so ashamed of what I did. Every single one of us was so self-critical. Um, it's so incredibly beautifully shot and cut together. It really, it really captures what it was like to have a live theatrical experience. It's really what PBS and Great Performances does so incredibly well. You know, I would put it way up there with the very best live captures that I've ever seen. You know, things like Into the Woods or Sweeney Todd. You know, I just think that the way they captured it was exactly what the play is, and it got all of the comedy right, and and it actually picked up many nuances because it can go into close-ups that I think maybe some audiences couldn't see because they were so far away. So I'm really, really proud of it. I'm going to see it again at CAAMFest, and hopefully I won't cringe at myself quite so much. Um, but you know, I am so proud of the fact that it's going to be out there and that a wider audience is going to get to see it. That wider swaths of America who watch PBS are going to get the chance to see it. I'm just bursting with excitement about that.
Yeah, Francis, by the way, you were great. I have to stress, you were great.
Thank you, thank
And
you for
watching it
saying that.
again, yeah, on screen, I
I'm gonna try to just say thank you. You know, my mom, I can just hear my mom. She's no longer with us, but I can hear her saying, you know, don't get a swelled head. And so, you know, I just have always, it's always been very difficult for me to accept a compliment, but I will say thank you very much, Grace.
No, I mean it's true. It's true. Yeah. Great. And I guess we're almost at time, so I guess I'll just ask my last question. What are you working
Sure.
on next?
Oh, well, so far this year, I have done 8 workshops of new things. I am about to do a reading at the 9/11 Memorial here in New York, a documentary play about Wells Crowther, the man with the red bandana, in honor of him. And I'm about to do another workshop of another new musical. And I have a play that I'm doing in New York in the fall. I'm not sure that I can tell you what it is because they haven't actually announced it yet. But it's a busy time, and stuff that I care about for lots of different reasons. So yeah, we'll see.
Keep an eye out.
I'll just keep doing it until it won't have me anymore.
I'm sure you'll be for a long time.
Grace, are you in